Hi folks, welcome back to the timeline no one ordered, but everyone's trapped in. It's 2025 in America, where the people who once screamed to follow the science now can't define a woman, and the so-called party of decency keeps handing out moral participation trophies to the absolute worst elements of society. It's never been more obvious Democrats aren't fighting for the working class, they're fighting for the feeling class, where identity is your resume and victimhood is currency. Today's clips show just how far gone things have really gone, where basic moral instincts are called bigotry and defending the indefensible is some kind of progressive virtue. This obviously isn't justice, it's just a straight up cult. Compassion without a conscience. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it.
People are inside that facility.
And they're MS-13 members, they're child traffickers, they're drug traffickers, they're bringing drugs into this country.
They are still human beings.
So you don't care if they're the worst criminal in the world and they have and murdered children, they're okay and they're still human beings and they should be here?
I believe that they are human beings and that they deserve dignity just as everybody else.
You think child deserve dignity?
Absolutely, I do.
What we just heard wasn't satire, it wasn't a misquote or a moment of confusion. It was an unfiltered glimpse into the modern progressive conscience. A conscience shaped not by truth, but by ideology. One that treats moral clarity as oppressive and extends empathy without discernment, even to those who have shattered the lives of others in unspeakable ways. Now, let's be honest. No one is arguing against the God-given dignity of being human. That's not what this is about. This is about a culture that no longer believes in evil. When someone defends the dignity of the most violent offenders without acknowledging justice or repentance, they're not promoting grace. They're erasing the moral line entirely. In this worldview, judgment is the only remaining sin, and the only virtue left is blind compassion, no matter the consequences. This is what happens when a culture trades truth for feelings, when justice is reduced to therapy and wrongdoing is blamed on systems instead of choices. For decades, the academic left has worked to dismantle absolute standards in the name of liberation. Foucault's fixation on power, critical theory's war on judgment. These aren't just classroom debates anymore. They've become the operating system of our public life. And in this system, the criminal is always a misunderstood victim, and the actual victims become politically inconvenient. So to be absolutely clear, this isn't compassion, it's just straight up confusion. And it has consequences. When the worst acts imaginable are met with abstract empathy instead of moral clarity, we don't get a more loving society, we get one that betrays the innocent. We tell victims they're secondary. We tell predators that justice can be negotiated. And we tell the public that accountability is optional so long as you check the right ideological boxes. So watch closely and you'll see how language itself is being used to shield darkness. Dignity now means silence in the face of sin. Compassion means deferring justice. It's why progressive DA offices keep releasing repeat offenders. It's why activist networks defend criminals before the facts are even known. It's why in 2025, Democrats were more outraged by Elon Musk auditing bureaucracy than by their own supporters firebombing Tesla dealerships. Because in this worldview, the true crime isn't destruction, it's judgment. So it's never been more evident that we're living in the fallout of a culture that has rejected repentance and accountability. A culture where every identity is sacred, every urge is validated, and every sin is a misunderstanding. But Christ doesn't call us to that kind of hollow mercy. He showed us what true mercy looks like, full of grace and full of truth. Forgiveness is always available, but never without repentance. And justice is not cruelty. It's love in action on behalf of the innocent. So no, we shouldn't glorify monsters. We should pray for their repentance while also not excusing their actions. Because a society that can't draw a line around the most basic forms of evil isn't compassionate, it's just spiritually blind. And the crazy thing is that this isn't even fringe anymore. It's the inevitable result of a worldview that refuses to name sin. And unless we recover the courage to speak moral truth, to draw real lines, and to protect the innocent without apology, this sickness will keep spreading through our institutions, our discourse, and even our children. Truth without love is harsh, but love without truth is a lie. And we were never called to lie in the name of kindness. And speaking of lies, Democrats know a thing or two about lying, so much so that they're now openly admitting to every single one of their lies from the past 4 years, and it's amazing to watch.
Democrats cannot only be the party of resistance. We cannot, we resisted so hard between 2017 and 2024. We impeached the guy, we prosecuted him, convicted him of 34 felony counts, and guess what? He still got elected. So I don't know how much harder we can resist now.
Are you admitting that, that the case against Trump in New York was part of the organized Democratic Party resistance?
It was a Democratic prosecutor, and at the time, I said I thought it was unwise. was. I went on Fox News and said
there were
said
Democrats who said this at the time.
There were a lot.
Just to be clear, this wasn't. Just to be clear, everybody who now touts the 34 felonies. Take it from Liz. This was not a real case. This was a plot to upend the presidential campaign, which backfired.
I just think it was a boneheaded move by Alvin Bragg, but it's not his first or last one. So.
This is why we invite Liz, because she's a plain-spoken New York Paul who can really tell it straightforward in a straightforward.
So there it is on live television with cameras rolling and anchors nodding along. A former top Democrat communications advisor just casually admitted what many have been saying for years and would get labeled conspiracy theorists for daring to point out the prosecution of Donald Trump wasn't about justice. It was about resistance. It was about power. It was about stopping the one man their entire political machine couldn't control. And they were willing to burn down the credibility of the justice system to try to do it. This wasn't just a gaffe. It was a confession. Liz Smith didn't stumble into this. She laid it out plainly. The Democrat Party's lawfare campaign against Trump, from the impeachment to the New York felony charges, it was all part of a coordinated, years-long strategy to criminalize opposition and weaponize courts as an extension of their political agenda. They weren't seeking truth, they were seeking a scalp. And even now, after all the headlines, all the courtroom theater, and all the 34 felonies rhetoric, they're still stunned that Trump won anyway. And to be clear, this moment isn't just about Trump. It's about the left's transformation from a political movement into an ideological machine that treats institutions as tools, not as sacred trusts. The DOJ, the FBI, the intelligence community, and now the Manhattan DA's office, these are no longer perceived as neutral. And that's not because of some right-wing fever dream. It's because Democrat operatives openly admit their party used these institutions to resist, to interfere in the will of the American people, to prosecute. Not because of the strength of the case, but because of the threat posed by the man they were targeting. And let's talk about what this actually reveals. First, it's a validation of everything the populist right has been warning about, that we're living under the two-tiered system where political alignment determines your legal fate. Smash a Tesla dealership, that's protest. Trespass in the Capitol, that's insurrection. But if you're Donald Trump, they'll dig until they find a decades-old hush money payment and call it a felony campaign finance crime. That's not justice. It's just narrative reinforcement. Second, it shows just how hollow the Democrats' moral posturing has become. For years, we were told they were defending democracy, that their actions were necessary to stop authoritarianism. But what could be more authoritarian than using the courts to eliminate your political rival? What could be more undemocratic than treating elections as irrelevant because your side lost? This is what happens when a political movement becomes a moral crusade. They stop believing in rules, only outcomes. They stop debating, they prosecute. They stop persuading, they suppress, censor, and indict. And when all else fails, they laugh about it on CNN as if they didn't just admit to one of the most corrupt political plays in modern American history. The left's cultural dominance in media, education, and entertainment gave them the confidence to try this kind of stunt. They believed the institutions would protect them, that the press would spin this, that voters would just swallow it and keep voting. But 2024 proved them wrong. Despite the lawfare, despite the censorship, despite the nonstop media campaign, Trump still won. And that's what has them truly rattled, because it means their grip is slipping. Their machine is breaking down. And now they're saying the quiet part out loud because they've honestly got nothing to lose. So we're not in the realm of political disagreement anymore. We're in a fight over reality itself. Who gets to define it, who gets to enforce it, and who pays the price for rejecting it? The Democrats have chosen to pursue power by any means necessary, and in doing so, they've exposed a rot at the heart of their movement, a willingness to destroy trust in democracy just to maintain their place at the top. So to be absolutely clear, this is more than a scandal, it's a turning point. And history will not look kindly on the people who thought resistance justified anything, not truth, not fairness, not justice, just raw, unrestrained power. And there's no better representative for that brain-dead Democrat leftist ideology than the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who recently went viral for making these comments.
Prime construction contract at O'Hare under my administration is the first black prime construction worker company to have a prime contract anywhere in the United States of America. And that's critical, not just for BOA Construction, but for the lives that he's going to transform because he's hiring them. But it's also critical for other major construction companies or mid-sized construction companies that are black owned to know that there is a mayor who sees them and is going to work hard to ensure that whether you're developing homes, whether you are, looking to help take advantage of the opportunities through aviation, whether it's entrepreneurship to provide a service, that there are resources available for you in the city of Chicago. And one thing that I know for sure that I have to do over these next 2 years, every single dime that our people have been robbed of, I want to make sure that that is returned threefold.
Well, Mayor Brandon Johnson just said isn't bold leadership, it's illegal racial discrimination dressed up as social justice. We're not talking about expanding opportunity. We're talking about openly prioritizing one racial group over all others for multi-million-dollar government contracts. And in case anyone's forgotten, that's a direct violation of the Civil Rights Act and the Constitution of the United States. But in 2025, if you wrap it in the right rhetoric, apparently you can say it into a microphone and still get applause. But here's exactly what he said. Every single dime our people have been robbed of, I want to make sure that it is returned threefold. And by our people, he means exclusively black residents. This isn't a race-neutral outreach. This is a race-based redistribution. Government favoritism based not on need, merit, or capability, but on skin color alone. And not only is that discriminatory, it's deeply condescending. It treats economic advancement not as something to be earned through competition and excellence, but something to be handed out based on historical grievance and political alignment. Now, to be clear, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It's the natural result of decades of race essentialism promoted by the academic left, institutionalized through DEI programs, and now baked into public policy. Critical race theory told us that disparities are always the result of oppression. DEI told us equity means equal outcomes, not equal opportunity. Now, progressive mayors like Johnson are putting that theory into practice, rewarding certain groups and excluding others, not to correct the law, but to literally override it. This isn't justice. It's a soft form of segregation with contracts instead of water fountains. And the irony is, it violates the very civil rights framework the left claims to uphold. If a mayor said this about prioritizing white-owned businesses, he'd be rightly run out of office. If it were Asian or Hispanic favoritism, the outrage would still be loud. But because Johnson cloaks it in the language of reparative justice, the left shrugs, or worse, it actually cheers for this kind of stuff. And by the way, we shouldn't miss the deeper damage that it comes as a result of this. First, it erodes trust in public institutions. Taxpayer-funded contracts are supposed to serve the public good, not double as political payback for racial blocs. Second, it sows division. It tells people in Chicago, especially working-class Hispanic, white, and Asian contractors, that their contributions are seen as less valued, that their efforts are less worthy, that their time will come only if their skin color fits the mayor's definition of our people. It also exposes a glaring hypocrisy on the left. These are the same people who scream about democracy and equality under the law, yet they openly applaud selective favoritism so long as it serves their narrative. The same people that sued to remove merit-based admissions at elite schools now want race-based payouts in government infrastructure. This is the progressive vision of fairness. Identity first, excellence second, legality completely optional. If Republicans proposed a contract scheme that prioritized only conservative-run companies, the media would absolutely erupt. If Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency dared to say we're prioritizing Tesla-affiliated firms to make up for past regulatory sabotage, the DOJ would launch an investigation before lunch. But when it's a Democrat mayor in a blue city using taxpayer dollars to run a race-first procurement program, somehow that's progress. So let's call this for what it is, a test case for how far the left can push institutional race favoritism before there's any sort of real accountability. And make no mistake, if this is allowed to stand, it won't stop in Chicago. It sets a precedent for every major blue city to follow suit. Contracts, loans, grants, benefits, distributed not by the rule of law, but by tribal affiliation. And I think it goes without saying that this isn't healing, it's factionalism. It's the politics of permanent grievance, not lasting prosperity. And it's a reminder that if we don't reclaim the idea of colorblind justice, true equality before the law, we will watch the American promise fracture along the very lines it was meant to overcome. And to be clear, the solution isn't to reverse the hierarchy, it's to dismantle it. And that starts with holding leaders accountable when they break the law in the name of equity. Because the Constitution doesn't care about your skin color, and neither should your mayor.
Some detractors that will push back on me and say, the only thing that the mayor talks about is the hiring of black people. No, what I'm saying is when you hire our people, we always look out for everybody else. We are the most generous people on the planet. I don't know too many cultures that have play cousins. That's how generous we are. We just make somebody a family member, right? This is how we are. And so business and economic neighborhood development, the deputy mayor is a black woman. Department of Planning and Development is a black woman. Infrastructure, deputy mayor is a black woman. Chief operations officer is a black man. Budget director is a black woman. Senior advisor is a black man.
Now, folks, I think it goes without saying that this wasn't an off-the-cuff cultural anecdote. It was a sitting U.S. mayor proudly announcing that his administration is built on racial favoritism, justified by the belief that one race is morally superior to others. Mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, didn't just say he's hiring the most qualified people. He said he's hiring black people because, in his words, they are the most generous people on the planet. That's not just patronizing, it's racist. And it's dangerous. Now, let's step back for a second and understand what this moment actually means. In 2025, we are no longer dealing with hidden bias or coded language. We are watching open racial essentialism from elected officials where race isn't just a factor in policy, it's the entire foundation. And somehow, this is still being framed as progress. Imagine for 1 second if a white mayor said, I hire white people because we're the most just, most noble, most generous race on earth. He'd be impeached before lunch. Every media outlet would have a countdown clock to his resignation. But when Brandon Johnson does it, it's celebrated as culturally enlightened leadership because in the world of left-wing identity politics, racism isn't wrong unless it points in the wrong direction. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about representation. This is about racial entitlement wrapped in moral superiority. It's the idea that blackness itself, not experience, not character, not competence, automatically confers virtue. This is the legacy of critical race theory applied to governance. CRT didn't stay in the universities. It jumped into city halls, school boards, HR departments, and now government hiring policies. It tells us that power structures must be re-engineered based on historical grievances, not present-day merit. And it's not just theory. Johnson literally rattled off a list of high-ranking officials in Chicago's government, all hired with race front and center. Not because they were the best for the job, not because of qualifications, but because of skin color and because, according to him, their race is inherently more selfless, more community-minded, more morally pure. So let's call it for what it is. Black supremacy. The roles are just reversed. But the logic is still essentially the same. And it's completely incompatible with the principles of a pluralistic constitutional republic. You cannot claim to oppose discrimination while openly advocating for racial favoritism. You cannot preach inclusion while explicitly excluding everyone who doesn't check the preferred identity box. And this isn't just a Chicago problem, it's a national trend. As the left loses cultural control over the narrative, it's doubling down on identity politics as its main tool for power. The goal isn't unity, it's factionalism. Divide people into tribes, assign moral value to each group, and reward political loyalty with government contracts, jobs, and influence. That's not equity, that's straight up corruption. This also erodes public trust. Taxpayers of every race deserve a government that serves the common good, not one that runs on racial patronage. When appointments and decisions are made based on ideology or identity rather than skill and service, you don't get justice. You get nepotism with better PR. And make no mistake, this rhetoric will backfire. Not just because it's morally wrong, but because it inflames the very tensions it claims to heal. When you tell entire communities they're less valued, less trusted, or less worthy of leadership based on their race, you don't sow justice, you sow resentment. You invite division, not solidarity. America didn't fight for civil rights so politicians could install a new racial hierarchy. The dream wasn't to replace exclusion with revenge. It was to create a country where your identity doesn't define your destiny. But the modern left has rejected that dream. In its place, they built a worldview where oppression is permanent, and the only justice is inversion. So let's be absolutely clear. Racial favoritism is wrong no matter who it benefits. It's wrong when it comes from the right, and it's wrong when it comes from the left. And if we don't push back now, if we don't stand up for equal treatment under the law, as the left loves to screech about, this descent into identity-first politics will become the new normal. And when that happens, America doesn't just fracture politically, it fractures morally. It loses the very idea that made it worth building in the first place. And speaking of people who have done their best to destroy America, in comes Hillary Clinton. What is she crying about now?
What advice do you have for the first female president of the United States?
Well,
oh my God.
First of all, don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy, which kind of eliminates every woman on the other side of the aisle, except for very few. Lisa Murkowski.
Liz Cheney.
Yeah, there's a few. Look, first we have to get there, and it is, obviously so much harder than it should be. If a woman runs who I think would be a good president, as I thought Kamala Harris would be, and as I knew I would be, I will support that woman.
Of course. Hillary Clinton is back, folks, once again lecturing American women on how to be women, so long as they vote the right way, obviously. In a recent interview, she dismissed virtually every conservative woman in the country as a handmaiden to the patriarchy, except for the usual token exceptions. Lisa Murkowski and Liz Cheney, two Republicans who haven't so much challenged the left as bent the knee to it. It's the same tired script. Progressive women are empowered. Everyone else is a traitor to the gender. Now, this isn't just bitterness, it's ideology. Hillary's comments perfectly reflect the left's ongoing project to collapse personal identity into political loyalty. In their worldview, womanhood isn't about biology, nor is it about moral convictions or lived experience. It's about whether you serve the narrative. If you do, you're a beacon of empowerment. If you don't, you're branded a puppet, a problem. Or, in Hillary's words, a handmaiden. This is the same woman who once called half the country a basket of deplorables, and here we are again, watching her dismiss millions of women, mothers, entrepreneurs, leaders, voters, women who genuinely care about this country solely because they didn't conform to the Democrat orthodoxy. Now let's step back and examine the deeper trend here. The left claims to champion diversity, but in practice, they mean demographic boxes. Not diversity of thought, obviously. You can be a woman, a minority, an immigrant. It doesn't matter. If you don't carry water for the progressive agenda, you are erased or demonized. Just ask Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was mocked as a female Scalia, or Kayleigh McEnany, ridiculed as a blonde mouthpiece, or Nikki Haley, labeled a white adjacent token. This isn't feminism. This is ideological chauvinism hiding behind a skirt. And it's not new. For decades, the progressive elite have portrayed conservative women as stupid, brainwashed, or self-hating. Why? Because women who reject the victimhood narrative, who believe in merit, motherhood, faith, or national sovereignty are a threat to the left's identity coalition. They prove that being a strong woman doesn't require conformity to state-approved beliefs. That's a problem for an ideology built on the illusion of unity. And the irony, of course, is that the left constantly accuses the right of being patriarchal and regressive while policing women's opinions like a 16th century theocracy. Hillary's worldview depends on the assumption that the only valid female leaders are those who think exactly like her. The rest are either invisible or evil. And when Kamala Harris is held up as a standard for what a qualified female president should look like, it tells you everything about how low that bar's been set. And we need to recognize that this isn't just about Hillary Clinton's personal frustrations. It's about the broader cultural force that insists women must be political soldiers for progressivism or else be branded with slurs and sneers. It's about the Democrat Party's inability to accept that millions of women are walking away, not because they hate women, but because they reject the left's shallow, patronizing idea of what female empowerment looks like. And that shift is accelerating. In 2024, Donald Trump saw a surge in support among women, especially minority women, not because he pandered, but because he talked about crime, the economy, and school choice, real issues that affect families, not theoretical gender wars cooked up by think tanks. Meanwhile, the left was offering pronoun pins and Planned Parenthood sound bites, so the contrast couldn't have been more obvious. So no, we won't be taking political advice from a twice-failed candidate who helped destabilize the Middle East, ran interference for Harvey Weinstein, and still thinks the only reason she lost is because America just isn't ready for a smart woman. Maybe America just isn't ready for Hillary. Has Hillary thought about that? Because the truth is, women don't need Hillary Clinton's permission to lead, to think, or to vote. Let's be real. Women can do all of that by themselves. They don't need to prove their empowerment by parroting progressive slogans either. They don't need to trade their convictions for clout. What they need, and what many are demanding, is respect for their agency, not condescension disguised as feminism. And the more the left sneers at conservative women, the more women walk away from the condescending machine they've built. Because empowerment is not about allegiance, it's about liberty. And in 2025, more women than ever are choosing freedom over feminism by force. So ask yourself, when did empowerment start requiring permission slips from political elites? When did identity become a leash instead of a legacy? We're living in a time where conformity is sold as compassion and blind allegiance is mistaken for progress. But real freedom, real strength means saying no to the scripts written for you by the people who only value you when you're useful to their cause. If the only women celebrated are the ones who echo the approved lines, is that liberation or is it just another kind of cage? The truth is, you don't owe loyalty to a narrative that would erase you the moment you think for yourself. And maybe it's time more people started asking, whose voice are you speaking with, yours or the one they gave you? Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.